Hello and welcome to Activating Magic. I'm your host, Darla Ledoux. I am so excited to be here with Ann Hession. And this is our first ever live broadcast recording of Activating Magic. So wish us luck. Welcome. So Ann has been featured on Activating Magic before,
Yes.
so you can go back and check out that episode. She is a sales expert. She helps healers to sell their services. And she's done that herself by building a six-figure healing practice, and then has sold millions of dollars of trainings and coaching services, helping other healers to do the same. So if you know you need sales help, go listen to that episode.
Absolutely.
Because we'll talk about some different stuff here today. So welcome.
It's so fun to be here. I'm really excited to do this.
Yeah, so we're here in my office. We'll talk to each other. It's like awkward because it's the first time.
It's all good.
So I want to start by just sharing, I really wanted to be able to be with people in person and touch them and, like have
We're
a
really here.
real podcast.
It's not just Zoom.
Exactly. Because, being on Zoom for 4 years straight, it's a lot. So I'm really excited to have you here in person. And I had the hit to create a studio and do this in person. And we had the opportunity to give a gift of generosity when we were in Cabo on retreat together. And so I got the download to do this and offered Caves and Conversations. And so you're the first.
Yes, because we weren't going to pass that up.
Yeah, so we visited the Vapor Caves this morning, which
So
is
cool.
a spa we'll talk about on here at some point, I'm sure.
It was very cool. Yeah.
And we're going to dive into maybe some other stories. But anything you want to share about, what had you say yes to be here and how the cave experience was?
Yeah. So that was the first time I've ever been in a vapor. I don't think I'd ever even heard the term vapor cave.
It's not really a thing.
Yeah. I mean, salt caves, other, stuff like that you hear about. But so it was a wild experience for me. It was, I loved it. And it was physically a healing experience for me, I think. I had a bad flu about a month ago, and I still got this little bit of the upper chest congestion. There might be a cough or two. I'll do my best, just saying. And so, because the humidity is so high and it's so warm, there were actually a few times when I started to have a little bit of that, I can't breathe, because when the humidity is that high, right, you can start to have that reaction. And I started to have a little bit of that, and then I was just like, yes, you can. You're breathing right now. Right? In fact, I'm breathing fine. So I had to keep kind of reconnecting to that. Yeah. And then the more I did that, the more it felt like just breathing in that warm, moist air was actually healing. Right. And then I did do a bit of a shamanic journey while we were there and asked for some healing for my lungs and stuff. And felt like I was receiving that healing, but in the breathing of that warm, moist air while I was receiving it was really powerful. Yeah.
Okay.
That's very cool.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I didn't know that.
Yeah, we hadn't talked about that yet. Yeah.
And it makes me want to ask, so you're a healer first, right?
Yes.
And then moving into the coaching space. So talk about how you got into healing specifically and how you use those practices for yourself. Like how did you choose what modality or how to do the experience?
I mean, it's been a long journey, right? If I go all the way back to my 20s, that's probably when I first got, so we're talking the 80s, just to be clear, a while ago. That's when I first kind of got exposed to, more alternative, holistic approaches to health, and got really intrigued by that. And I grew up in Massachusetts. I ended up moving to Maui. Partly, it was my brother. My brother first kind of got interested in all this stuff. That's a whole story we could get into.
Okay.
If you want, I will give you the short version.
Older brother?
My older brother.
Okay.
I have two older brothers, but it's a middle brother. And I'll give you the short version. So he had because this is magic.
Okay.
So he had totally messed up his knees between soccer, wrestling, and a car accident. By his early 20s, it was hard for him to walk. And running was basically like out of the question because he had just torn up the cartilage in both knees. So he went to get knee surgery, and the surgeon said to him, explain what was going on, and just was like, and you can't regrow cartilage, so we're going to have to remove it. And my brother was like, well, why can't you? And they were just like, because you can't. It's not something you say to my brother. Okay. And he just started to go, he kind of went on this his journey of trying to figure out, could do that. He just found Rolfing, and then he got connected to this particular kind of healing work, which isn't really out there anymore. It was called body electronics. So long story short, he moved to Maui and was studying with someone there. I got interested. I moved to Maui too. Just to close the loop on his, and it was a journey of several years. I forgot to say. So he had surgery on one knee. They removed the cartilage. Didn't really give him any good. Wasn't really any better. So now he's like, well, there's no point in doing this other thing, right? And then that's when he found all this stuff. Within a few years, he had completely healed both knees. Like he hadn't...
With cartilage.
Yes. And when I say completely healed, like he then started teaching some of this stuff, and he had an orthopedic surgeon come to one of his seminars, and the surgeon was like, come on, this is not possible. And he's like, well, check him out. So an orthopedic surgeon did a full exam on both of his knees, which he knows how to do. He's an orthopedic surgeon.
Right.
And he's like, your knees are perfect.
Wow.
So I just had to throw in that little bit of magic.
Yeah. I love that. I just interviewed someone who is all about, like, our body is designed to heal.
Yeah.
And we just get in the way of it with our
we do,
thoughts,
right?
beliefs.
I've regenerated, like, not a whole tooth, but like tooth material. Like I had a tooth where the decay got under a filling, and we drilled out the filling, and you could see the nerve exposures, like bright red. The dentist was willing to work with me and put in like a temporary, and then I like worked on it to see if I could do it up. And then, so like, I don't know, 8-9 months later, he went back in, drilled out the temporary filling, fully expecting to see it was just as bad. Yeah. And yes, you're going to have to root canal. And he was gobsmacked because it was completely covered over with new tooth material.
So you've never had a root canal?
I actually have, but I didn't need one on that tooth.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like your body can't actually heal stuff that you're told it can't. Doesn't mean it always will.
Right.
But it's possible. It's not. It's not impossible.
That's pretty compelling, like reason to go into healing for you, you know, seeing that with your brother.
Yeah.
So something I learned about you today is that you have a degree from Harvard.
I do, actually.
In psychology.
Yes, I have a BA. Yeah.
And so you got that degree before you went to Maui.
Yes. Yeah.
And so we talked a little bit. So first of all, can you describe like where you said it was like at the end of a road, a bunch of, I'm imagining.
So when I moved to Maui, so this would have been like 87.
Okay.
And so, we were living, we didn't call it a commune, but it was basically a commune. Maui's still this way to some degree, but in the 80s, it was very much new age, old hippies, very like, it just, to the max. And my brother and I and a bunch of other people, we lived on this beautiful property, but out in no phone, no electricity. We had a little bit of solar, an incredibly beautiful waterfall right on our property, like unbelievable. But we were renting and living and out there in the rainforest basically, and studying and learning this. And what I was doing for a living, and my brother and I, a few other people, we were cab drivers. So I was a cab driver on Maui.
Okay.
Had an interesting life.
Okay. I love
doing all this healing work, driving a cab over the other side of the island, then come back to our. So that's what I did after Harvard. I will say I went to my 5th reunion, and people were like asking me, and of course I was very tan too,
Right.
And people were like, so where have you been? I said, well, I've been on Maui, I've been doing this, and one of my friends were like, you did the coolest thing of anybody over the last 5 years. Everybody else just went to like med school or law school, but that was really cool.
That's awesome. Okay, so we were talking about magic
Yes.
and like an example of magic. So talk about this book that you found. So you're Harvard educated, like
so
but something's not resonating.
I chose to major in psychology. And it was fascinating. I learned a lot of really cool things. I think I was interested in like people and why do we do what we do, right? But by the time I was getting towards graduating, I knew I wasn't going to continue in the field. Like I wasn't going to become a psychologist or psychiatrist. I couldn't have.
How did you know?
I sorry, I'm laughing because, it's like if you're going to do that, you probably really need to go and like go for honors and like write a thesis. And I was like, I'm not interested in this enough to spend a year of my life writing a thesis.
Clear.
That was probably like the actual like defining point. So I couldn't have really told you though. Like I couldn't have been like, the reason I'm not, because I was still interested. My first job out of college was like going and working with like inner city kids who were, in like the foster system and everything. So still interested in like, helping people and that kind of thing. So anyway, but then after a couple of years, I ended up deciding to go join my brother on Maui and was getting into this whole kind of holistic and spiritual healing kind of thing. And amazing, totally transformational time of my life. I can't even begin to describe how my whole outlook on life shifted as a result of all that experience, but I'll share this one particular thing. So one day while I was there, I was at a friend's house and I was just waiting for him to get ready or something. And I saw this just little paperback book sitting there, and I just picked it up. So I had nothing to do. I was waiting. And it was a book of lectures by a Russian philosopher named P.D. Uspensky. I've never studied philosophy. I don't know anything about philosophy. But it was there, and I was bored, so I picked it up. And I started just reading, and it was like one of those like life-changing kind of moments. So he was writing in the 30s about the field of psychology, okay? So 50 years earlier. And so if you know anything about psychology, if you think in that time, Freud is still fairly influential, but what's really happening in the field of psychology is behaviorism. B.F. Skinner, stimulus response, all that kind of stuff. So it's this very kind of mechanical science, very like we're trying to make psychology into a hard science kind of approach. Do you know what I mean? Like that's really what's going on. Not remotely spiritual, that kind of stuff. This is 50 years later, but what he said really resonated for me. And he said, and I'll paraphrase, he said, the problem with the field of psychology is that it is entirely concerned with what is and not at all with what's possible. And I was like, I didn't have, you ever had that experience? Like you didn't have someone else put it into words and you're like, yes, that's what I've been feeling, right?
Yes.
And I was like, studying psychology was fascinating. I had some amazing professors. And it was really interesting, but to me, it's like the understanding what's so or what is could be fascinating on its own, but for me, it's what is compelling about it is in service of, okay, if we better understand what is, then that can help us create what's possible.
Right.
So it's really, I got this like clarity that that's what my life is about. My life is about what's possible. Like what else is possible for me? What else is possible for humans? What's possible for us as a species? Years later, I was in some personal development course or other. I've taken a few.
Right, as we do.
And part of it was writing like a charter for your life, kind of like you would for a business with a mission and your core values and all that. And I remember what I wrote was that I felt like that my mission is to, or part of my purpose here on the planet is to forward the evolution of human consciousness. Right? It's like I want to contribute to that because I think human consciousness is something that is our individual and group consciousness is expanding, it's growing, and I want to help forward it.
Wow.
So
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of, I've worked with a lot of people who are therapists transitioning into coaching. Have you as well in your business?
Yeah, for sure.
And that idea of putting a diagnosis
Yes.
on someone, it
Yeah.
starts to
So
become in conflict.
DSM, whatever number we're at now, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, I don't even know what number we're at, but that's this, it's funny. It was actually one of the things that I found was really interesting about studying psychology. And I think probably in the 80s, and I would say probably especially at Harvard, I mean, I'm not uniquely there, but there was, I used to joke about it. I would say the psychology department has physics envy. Little psychology joke there, right? It's like, right? They like really.
That's so funny.
I was 20. But it's like they really want to be a hard science. You know what I mean? And it's like, and there's aspects of hard science in psychology, when you're studying stuff in the brain and all of that stuff. But fundamentally, it's the study of human behavior, and it's never going to be physics.
If we bring in quantum physics,
although
then they have a baby.
Yeah, exactly. That's where it gets to, is when you actually get to quantum physics. But it was kind of interesting. Like I was more interested in the this sort of squishier or whatever aspects of it, and there was this push, to like be more like cognitive psychology was like the thing back then, which was really like the air of behaviorism, right? It was sort of like the next level of behaviorism. Yeah.
So how do you think now about this idea of like kind of proving yourself or proving it's true, proving it's right? That's what I'm hearing. Is like psychology wanted to prove itself.
Yeah, I think there was an element of that, and first of all, that's very human. That's just what we all do. But to me, like I wasn't interested in that. I was interested, like I said, I was interested in like, well, let's see what else is possible. What else? How could we take what we already know and continue to expand our knowledge? And I'm fascinated by stuff that they're discovering in brain research. I just did a little thing about it the other day about, did this thing, the anterior mid-cingulate cortex.
No, teach us.
There's this part of your brain, the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, and some people say it gets bigger. It's not so much that it gets bigger, but it gets sort of more active, and I would say stronger, like more neural connections, whenever you do something you don't want to do.
Okay.
Isn't that interesting?
Interesting.
Not necessarily that it's harder, but when you do you push past your resistance, you'll be like, I'm gonna go work out. I'm not right. I know it's raining, but I said I would do it. So when you do the thing you don't want to do, it activates this part of your brain, and it has to do with willpower.
And what does that
thing?
Yeah, what does that help with?
It's helping you build a brain that's more likely to just do the things that are important to you when you just don't feel like it. Even when you just don't want to. Isn't that interesting? So I find that super. I find that very inspiring.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So if I go and I do the thing, and I am working out a lot right now because
we'll definitely talk about that.
Weirdly, somehow I'm doing a triathlon. I'm not, it just kind of happened. It's not at all my thing, but I'm doing it. So there's a lot of having to do stuff that in the moment I don't particularly want to do. And it's been awesome. It's been very good for me. But like, I love having the idea that, okay, I'm going to do this thing. It's because I say it's important, right? Even though I don't want to right now, that not only am I then going to get whatever result that would get me, but also I'm literally like changing my brain.
Yes.
And it's a great example actually of that. I like knowing what's so in service of what's possible, right? Such a good example of that. It's like, well, what's possible for my brain, right, is to become a brain that's literally wired better for me to accomplish the things that really matter to me, and to not, sell myself short, and not to do things that, like, every time you do that thing you don't want to do, you're literally neuroplasticity,
I love that
right?
so much.
I know, isn't it great? Because, it's so cool to me.
Like, I think about, I teach about this a lot. Like, when I started my business, there were so many things I was terrified of, right? And then you start doing it, and then all of a sudden that thing you had no idea how to do, that felt like you might die, is second nature.
Yeah,
but there's always a new
and then there's
thing.
But then there's the next thing, right? Exactly.
But they become easier because you've been there. I think of it as I've been there before.
Yes, exactly.
I've moved through resistance and not died so many times. Yeah. But maybe it's just that part of my brain.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You've been developing that part of your brain.
Right.
And so that's how it is now.
Interesting.
Isn't that cool? It's like,
Yeah.
I just keep thinking, I'm building a better brain.
That's so great.
love
So people could just tell themselves that
Yeah.
when there's a hard thing, right?
It's like,
I'm building a better
I'm
brain.
not just doing this. I'm not just doing this thing that that I'm resisting or afraid of or whatever. I just don't feel like it, right? Like how often do we stop because we just don't feel like it? It's like not really a great reason to not do something that you think is important.
Right. And then we start analyzing.
Right. And then
is it important enough?
Yeah,
is it not? And it's like, you could have done the thing.
Exactly, right. We rationalize all that stuff. So, but like, to me, it's like, I'm not just doing the thing. I'm not just going for the run or recording the thing or whatever. I'm literally, as I do it, I'm building myself a stronger brain. I just love that.
That's awesome. Yes. So let's kind of talk a little bit about you're in Maui. You get this insight. Oh my gosh, my life is about what's possible.
Yeah.
How did you, where do you think that knowing came from? How do you interpret that?
I don't know. I mean, I think it was already there. I just didn't have the words for it, right?
Right.
And there's power, we live inside of language as humans. That's just part of who we are, right? If we don't have language for something, then we don't have a facility with it. We can't do much with it, right?
Right.
And there's a quote from Helen Keller where she talks about that because she was literally a person who had no language and then had language, and she has described her. She's like, I don't know the exact words, but she basically was like, I really was not a person. I was just this mass of feelings and whatever. But until I had language, that's kind of when I became a person, right?
Wow.
I'm not saying it exactly, but that's the idea.
So you're going through all of these classes, and some part of you is thinking, wait, no, this isn't right. This doesn't make sense.
But I didn't have the language for it until that moment. And so I think that there's, who knows, you could say, oh, someone made me pick up that, but I don't know. Like, all I know is I did pick up the book. Right? And I'll tell you, there's two things I remember from that little book of lectures. One was that, and the other was, he said, and I'm going to, again, just paraphrase, but I think this is pretty close. He said, man is a machine. But he's a very peculiar machine. Of course, he was saying man because it was the 30s.
Right.
No one was trying to be inclusive back then. So man is a machine, but he's a very peculiar machine because he's a machine who's capable of knowing that he's a machine. And in the knowing that he's a machine, he's capable of not being a machine. That was another really good one.
I feel like that feels deep for our time of AI right now.
Right? It's like we're very, talk about stimulus response. We got these programs running us, all this stuff, but we are capable of seeing that. We're capable of, right? Like, that's how I always do things. Yeah. That doesn't mean I have to keep doing it that way. Right. I can change, whatever. And in that moment, we're not being a machine. Right. And so, those kind of like ideas and concepts and stuff, then once it's like there's certain things that's like the genie out of the bottle, right? You can't unknow it. You can't unknow it, right? I mean, there's just that whole time of my life, it was almost like revelation a day of things that were like getting more clear.
How much of that do you think was the environment?
It was a huge part because so I was with people who were, I was about to say, thinking deep thoughts, which made me think of that thing in The Wizard of Oz, when he's giving the scarecrow his thing, like, we think deep thoughts. But I was with people who were interested in that, interested in what's possible, interested in going. How did that compare? Why can't I recruit the cartilage in my knee? Maybe I can,
Well, how was that compared to the environment of Harvard? Because you would think that would be also curious.
Absolutely, very much so. And, that it just, but it was a different kind of environment in terms of the kinds of things. First of all, there were all kinds of different things people were interested in, all different kinds of things were studied, and very, very innovative and creative people. And, there's people that I went to school with who have been doing really groundbreaking stuff, right? But this was, I don't know, this was just like a small community. And it was specifically, which is what I needed at that time in my life, more around the personal and spiritual part, right? Like I wasn't having a whole lot of particularly spiritual conversations when I was in college. Because although interestingly, I very much recognized that. I remember after graduating, and I moved back in with my parents for a bit. I was trying to figure out what the heck I was going to do with my life. plus that first job with inner city kids paid less than my last year at Harvard cost. And it wasn't as nearly as expensive back then. But I actually had this recognition that I had not been focused on myself as a spiritual person for several years, and that it was a missing. Like I remember being aware of that, and that's probably partly why I started getting into and ended up going to Maui and all that. It was kind of like I grew in all these other ways, and now it's time to really grow spiritually.
Yeah. I remember in college having a spiritual crisis of sorts, and a friend of mine and I started talking about our spiritual crisis, and we both decided to do Bible study, and we started reading the Bible, and I read it and decided, and like various Christian books, associated books, and I read them all, and I decided, oh, this is not for me. And she read them all and was like all in. And it was, but I never resolved it at that point. I got curious, and then I just went, I guess this isn't for me. Got you into other
things. Yeah. So interesting. But yeah.
So from the time you went to Maui to when you started practicing in your healing work, what was the time frame there?
Well, I mean, there was an element of it. So I was there for about 3 years, and then when I came back, I actually decided to go to massage school because I didn't want to like. I thought about like I could be more like a chiropractor or something like that, but I was like, I don't really want to do all that. I was like, so I went to massage school, and I had a pretty successful massage practice, in which I was doing energy healing, although I didn't realize it really and wouldn't have called it that. At the time, but I did that for a while, and then kind of got more into kind of coaching. I was doing a lot of personal development work in general, and it wasn't really until about 10 years ago that I started explicitly doing work that I would say that's energy healing. Looking back, I mean, there was an element of that for 40 years, but I wouldn't have called it that.
So when you're doing massage and accidental energy work and then adding coaching, like how did you know to add coaching?
I just got interested in it, right? I mean, I took some courses and stuff where there was like a coaching element, and I was like, ooh, I'd like to do that, which is I think how most people get into coaching.
Yeah.
Like I want to be like that, I want to help people that way, so it was bringing in this other element, of engaging with people but it's back to the whole possibility thing, right? Engaging people in an element of like, well, what else is possible for you than where you are right now. And helping people to because it's all about seeing things differently, right?
Yeah, that's the magic.
That's the magic, is like however we see it is how we see it. And until we open something up to be able to see it differently, it doesn't change. Because, the world just is as it is. The world is as it is, but we're not seeing most of it. It's really seeing what we...
tunnel vision.
Yeah. And it takes could take all kinds of things, actually. But one of the things I think it takes is being around people who are in similar kinds of conversations, and, just allowing those things to come in. Like in this case, it took something written 50 years before to go, that's it for me.
Right.
But it could also just happen in a conversation.
Yeah. I remember I was just talking with a group of clients about the first event I ever went to. I was trained as a coach, and I was just learning that there were people that could teach you how to run a business. Because I had worked in corporate and I, doing multi-million-dollar budgets, not like, oh, how do I put up a website? I had no idea.
It's different.
And so I found myself in this retreat, and they made an offer for coaching, and it was like this huge thing that I didn't know existed.
Right.
And there were 300 people in the room, and all of a sudden I got this thing, and I started looking around like, who are these people that are like here, and they're buying this support for their business. And I thought, am I in the wrong room? Like, do they know that I don't understand what's happening
what is
here?
This thing?
But I ended up, before I left, signing up, or at least by the time I got home, I was like, okay, I think I have to do this. And I was sharing about it, and I was just in tears by how that's changed my life to get in different conversations. Like, it was the coaching, all of that helped, but it was being in rooms with people who were also creating possibility in their life as
and
opposed
exploring
to
and trying things and figuring out and falling flat on their faces, but then getting up again and like figuring out what they can learn from that, and learning from people who've they've not necessarily done exactly what you're trying to do, although sometimes, but they've they're at least a few steps ahead, at least in that area, and like being willing to learn from them and not
and
no, I
they
have
get
to figure it all out myself, none of that stuff. So
it's kind of like, I think about you picking up that book. Like for me, there were moments where I was talking about something that I got reflected back to me. Yeah, that's true. That's real.
Yeah,
It's not like in your imagination.
Yeah, exactly.
And those moments changed everything.
They do, and they sometimes it's validating something that you were feeling, but like in that case, I didn't have the words for it, or just helping you understand something. Like I think I'll tell you another quick little story. Have you ever read the book Illusions by Richard Bach?
No.
Illusions. Oh my God, I can't believe you haven't read this book.
No.
Illusions: The Adventures of Our Elected Messiah. Okay, it's by Richard Bach, the guy who wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which you probably read because we all kind of read that when we were kids. Really fascinating.
Okay.
Short, amazing book, and it is full of the most amazing quotes. And there's this one part of the book where it basically says, at any moment you are free to choose a different present, a different future, and even a different past. So I was 17 when I read that, and I was like, well, that can't possibly be true, right? How could you choose a different past? It's the past. It's done.
Right.
I was like, that's not possible. And at the same time, I 100% knew it was true. Like I knew it was true.
Did you feel it in your body?
Yeah, I just knew it was true, but I couldn't see how it could be true.
Right.
Right. And so, it kind of was just there for me, right? And then, I don't know, 6 or 7 years later on Maui, I was doing some really deep healing work. And actually, the thing I was actually remembering something. I was remembering a time when I was a little girl and I was being punished because I had really, really screwed up. Like my parents were wonderful parents. They were very patient, but this was a situation where I'd been told, if don't do it. If you do it again, this will happen. If you do it again, you're actually going to get a spanking because we were still spanked back then. And I did it.
Says a few things about you.
So the memory is we're in the basement because that's where you would go if this was happening. And I'm there with my mom, and I suddenly had this realization that we were both stuck in the same exact thought, which was, there's nothing I can do about it. I got myself here, and also my mom was like, well, I told her she did it. I have to. She didn't want to. It wasn't like she was doing it in anger. It was just I have to follow through.
Yeah.
So we were both stuck in this, and I could, in the reliving of it, I could get oh my God, we're both having the exact same thought, the exact same thing. It's like a pattern, and we're both stuck in the same thing right now. And in getting that, I could be free of that, right? And not drop any resistance to it, and just kind of relive the whole thing from a completely different perspective. Because of course I didn't see that when I was 7 or something. And so that happened, and I could feel all this energy leave my body and all the stuff that happens when you do this kind of cool work. And then I suddenly was like, oh, that's what he meant. That quote.
Right.
Because in that moment I chose a different past.
Yes.
Right? Because the thing that actually happened, what a fly on the wall would have seen, this thing, that didn't have any impact on me. The only thing that had an impact on me was everything I made it mean.
There's nothing I can do.
Right. In that thing, and that became a thing. And so when I let go of that, I literally changed my past because I changed what it meant for me. And it was I was literally oh my God, that thing that I could not figure out. That's what it is.
How long was it from when you read it?
6 or 7 years or something, right?
Wow. And then I'm curious, were there places in your life at that time where you were feeling there's nothing I can do about it, and that also changed?
Yeah, I think that's a place, and I mean, not that I can think of a specific thing, right? At that time, but in general in my life, there were definitely things where I would get locked into guess we just has to be this way. There's nothing I can do about it, and I don't think that's ever had that kind of grip on me ever since. I'm more likely to just be well, what can we do about it? Like, maybe
Right. What's possible here?
What else is possible, right? Like, I think it's probably, I'm a really good problem solver. Like, I'm really, really good at just like, let's figure it out, right? And I don't know if that ever would happen if I hadn't like really gotten that pattern and like cleared it out of myself.
That's amazing.
Because you don't solve problems when you're convinced there's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
Why would you bother?
It's interesting you're talking about that. I've been playing with creating a different past. So, like,
that's how you do it.
I mean, I've had those experiences, right? Of going back and repatterning and the energy
and you're
moves.
like, oh, it's different past.
And then I had this thought not too long ago. So the facts of my childhood is my parents divorced when I was young, and then we moved a lot.
Right.
And I was always in a different environment.
Right.
And I've really focused in recent years on creating this sense of safety and support. And that wasn't, didn't feel safe.
There. Yeah.
And so I'm like, I'm not going to tell that story anymore. I mean, I'm kind of telling it right now, but I haven't said it since. And I'm like, when we did live at home, it was near my grandparents, like in an apartment above their garage. And so I just said, what if I just reimagine that I just lived with my grandma? Yeah. Because that was safe. It was right there. And
it's true. I mean, so.
Yeah. And it starts to change how I hold myself, right? Totally. Like, oh, I was secure. Yeah. I am secure.
Yeah, 100%. And we'd have to, because it's the stories we tell that create our lives, right? We create our lives every second by the words coming out of our mouths. That's just how it works. And you remind me of a story. I remember this woman, I was in a personal development course. And
I feel like we just need to pause and say, if you're not taking a lot of personal development courses, business development courses, that's the key.
Yeah, exactly. So part of this course was you were actually kind of creating like an autobiography, right? And there had certain requirements of like you had to have a picture from each year of your life, a picture of you, things like that. And so this woman was really, really resisting that. She's like, I just had an unhappy childhood. I just did. It's okay. I'm fine. But I had an unhappy child, and I was the last of however many kids. There's no pictures of me. Like, they're just, right? She was like so in that, right? And so, but she finally like let go of it and just did the work. She just did the assignment and went to family. And what did she find? Picture after picture of her smiling her butt off, like laughing, having a great, here's this photographic evidence of happy you in this unhappy childhood that you are so sure you had, right?
And there are no photos.
And there's no photos, and if they do, I'd be miserable. And here's all these like pictures of her. And it was so, she like became, it's like, she just was like a different person. Like you almost wouldn't physically recognize her because she let go of the story, I had an unhappy childhood.
Right. Like there was some moment where she decided
that was true.
Everything else.
That was her story. And now she doesn't have that story anymore.
What are the stories that you hear the most from the healers and coaches that you work with when it comes to
what's holding them back?
Yeah.
A big one, there's a lot of unworthiness, right? And feeling like they're not important and they're not seen. There's a lot of like, no one's listening, or no one cares.
No one's listening.
No one's listening. No one cares what I have to say. No one wants to hear what I have to say. There's a lot of feeling like they're not valued or important.
Are there themes of like ways that they've repatterned that, or discoveries that your clients have?
I think that I really think the only way we change stuff like that, I mean, let's see, how do I answer this? So there's things in certainly the world of energy healing and therapy and things like that where you are recognizing patterns and you're shifting them and doing internal work, right? And that's super important, obviously. Yeah. But I think the only way you like really, really change that stuff in addition to the internal is by taking action. Yeah. Right? And so when they do speak up and then they get the validation and they do get that someone was listening, I think all the inner work in the world can't, as important as it is, like do that. But it doesn't substitute for actually being like, okay, I'm gonna raise my hand, or I'm gonna speak up, or I'm gonna say the thing, even though I'm terrified.
Yeah.
So I think that's where, it comes down to confidence, really.
And my thought is like it's both, because, for example, if you hadn't repatterned, there's nothing I can do here.
Yeah.
I find I could speak for myself, there's been different examples of, even though maybe I know that's there, or, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to speak up today. But if that's still the energy, it's like literally no one hears. Like I've had the experience of being in a group and like, okay, I'm going to say something. And it's like literally no one, there's not a pause. Nobody looks my direction. It's like I'm invisible. I mean, I now know like a fair amount about my human design and how like that will happen if I'm not feeling the pull to speak up. But but I've seen clients be like, okay, I'm going to go do it. And then they get the same old result, right? Because they haven't.
But you also have to do both. That's what I'm saying. You have to do both. And the reason I was saying, kind of emphasizing the taking action, is because healers will try to do it all on the inner side. Yeah. They'll be like, I'm just going to heal and heal and heal and heal and clear and clear.
Eventually it'll feel good and I'll want to do it.
Eventually it'll feel good and then I'll do it. And it's like, do that. I mean, do this. Do the inner work, right? I'm an energy healer. Of course, I'm totally, you have to do that. But it doesn't substitute for the action.
Yes.
They have to go hand in hand. You have to do both.
And also, don't go around trying to find something to heal until you know what it is. Well, how do you know what it is? You have to take action and get a result.
Exactly.
Yeah. I feel like that goes back to that part of the brain you were talking about earlier, and how it can feel insurmountable sometimes to take the action.
Yeah. So even if you just take a little, right?
Yeah.
Even if you just take a little, it starts to shift your brain chemistry, right? And it starts to, and then and then it also starts to shift what you see as possible and what you see to look at. I mean, there's the whole, we do brain stuff too, but the reticular activating system, which you probably teach about too, that's that part of your brain, for those who don't know, that it basically tells you what to pay attention to. That's the simplest sort of layman term of like, that's what it is, because you can't possibly pay attention to everything.
Right.
And so if your reticular activating system is telling you to pay attention to how no one's listening to you.
Exactly.
Then that's all you'll see, right? So when you have to start giving some different input, and start and challenge it, and tell yourself to look for where people are responding, or whatever it is. But so our brains are a lot more malleable than I think we've always realized. Yeah. And that's where the studying what is around your brain is fascinating, because it helps you see what else is possible.
Yeah, and if your brother can regrow cartilage, we certainly can change our brain.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, or you regrew your tooth.
I did.
That's blowing my mind a little bit.
Regenerated some tooth tissue. I have the evidence. I saw it myself. He did the little, the little mirror they put in your mouth. He did it, and I was like, this tooth had 3 bright red dots, and he was like, those are 3 nerve exposures, and that were because it was under the filling, because the decay got under the filling. And he's like, that's an automatic root canal. It wasn't infected. If it had been infected, he probably would have insisted. But he's like, that's, but we'd been talking about kind of alternative stuff. And I was like, can I give it a try? And he's like, yeah, we'll put in a temporary filling. And then I just did
What did you do? Did you visualize?
I
tell me what you did.
I did a lot of nutritional stuff, like colloidal minerals and stuff. I did a lot of comfrey, because that's really good for your body healing, and I think bones in particular, actually, which your teeth are basically bones, and a lot of sort of visualizing and focusing on it. And I did it for a while, like 6 or 8 months, because I kind of was like, I don't want to. If it's working, I want to give it time to work too. Yeah. And then he went in there. I'll never look at the look on his face. He was totally not expecting. And then he showed me the little thing, and they were.
He's like, I'm a believer.
All 3 exposures were completely covered up by healthy new tooth material.
Amazing.
Cool. That was very cool.
I want to go back to the question I asked earlier. In the cave, you tell me about the experience you had, like how you decided to journey in the cave.
Yeah, I mean, I might have done it anyway, just because I do have some of that shamanic training, and I do some journeying. I don't do it as often as I probably should, but I do. Every time when I journey to what's usually referred to as, at least in the way I've been taught about it, the lower world, which is more like the world of the spirit, the earth and power animals. And my sort of main power animal is a rabbit.
Okay.
That's who always greets me. Very sassy little rabbit. And it's usually like, where have you been? So, but I think what I definitely did is, because I was having a little trouble breathing. I mean, I wasn't actually having trouble breathing, but like it was triggering. The humidity was making me think I was having trouble breathing.
Sure.
Right? And so I had to kind of really focus and be like, no, actually you're breathing just fine. You're, plenty of oxygen getting in there. But I was like, so let me ask for some healing. Because I really would like for this to be over. And so I did a little journey, and then asked if there was any spirit animal or anyone else for that matter who had either a message for me or some healing for me. And then the turtle showed up, sea turtle.
You have a turtle on your phone.
I do. I love sea turtles, and the turtles in general actually, but sea turtles in particular. And and it was really just a very simple, like, of just slow down. Right, which I do need to be told at times. I'm a bit of a little more of a rabbit. It's funny, it was a rabbit and a turtle. There you go. And just like, and then I just felt healing, like the healing coming in, and something. Oh, actually, there was another thing too. There was like a eagle, I think. She was very interesting, and I asked if there was healing, and I had this. What I kept seeing visually was an eagle literally like pecking at me, like something that you would think would hurt.
At your chest?
No, more like here. I mean, it was a distinct feeling of like something's being removed. Except, and it sounds, that I describe it's like, it sounds awful, but it didn't experience. It was more like, yeah, you really need this. We're just going to get in there and get it for you, and I could feel that, this just kind of heavy energy leaving from my brain. And then the turtle came in, and it was just a lot of just soothing and healing through here. And it's it's not all gone, but
what do you think you'll take away from that, if you had to say?
I have gotten so much better at accepting and asking for support compared to like my defaults, but I still could do it more, and I could be asking for healing. If I ask for healing from, whether it's spirit animals, my own guides, I always get it. I could ask for it more often. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, because it's just not my default setting. Right. My default setting is I'm strong and self-sufficient. I'll do it myself. So I have to, and that's fine.
Right.
That's a great thing to be able to be.
I'm guessing some
but
people
I don't want to run it.
Listening relate to that.
Yes.
Like, I'm strong. I'm independent.
Strong,
I can do it myself.
And I'm going to take care of everybody else. And healers are way more comfortable taking care of other people than they are allowing themselves to be taken care of as a general rule. And it's not really serving that anybody, including themselves. And it's just that it's a default, right? It's a default setting as opposed to a real choice.
That's literally how I talk about it. Default energy pattern.
Yeah. And it's just, it's not really a choice, and therefore it's not actually as high vibration as you think it is.
Right, right. Yeah, because the default energy, this is how I teach it, Anne, is like the default energy is based on something that happened in the past.
Yep.
So we're fixed on this past thing and using that to try to control the future to avoid whatever happened when we
don't want to feel that again.
Relied on someone in the past, right? Yeah. So in that new space, what's possible?
Yeah.
Asking, receiving.
Yeah.
So I love that. I feel like I want to say a minute about the sacred vapor caves. So, the caves are, they were and are a sacred site for the local Ute tribe here in the mountains in Colorado, a site where they would go and do ceremony and give offerings and all of that. And so I feel really delighted that you had that experience today.
It was really bad. I really never experienced anything like it. And I'll carry it with me. Like it was very powerful. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So you have an event called Sold, SOULD.
Apostrophe
So
D, yes.
I definitely want to just like say a little bit about that.
Sure.
And then we're going to offer people a gift in the show notes.
Yes.
That they'll eventually learn about this event.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's a online event. The next one's coming up in June, and it's really it's not exclusively healers, but healers, what I like to call soulpreneurs,
Yes.
spiritual entrepreneurs, transformational coaches, all that stuff we've been talking about, who I find really, most of them really struggle with the business side. They're like, I just want to help people. Why is it so hard?
Yeah.
Right? Why is it so hard to get clients? Why is it so hard to talk about what I do? Why is it so hard to charge for what I do? Why is it so, there's just all these old patterns. And so, I am a healer myself, but I have, kind of done the work, both internal and external, to learn about the business side, and especially what I'll call the sales side, which is really just sharing about what you do, to be able to actually talk about it in a way that people understand it and see what's something that's possible for themselves. It all comes back to what's possible.
Yes.
And so whether you want to call it sales or not, that's basically what it is. And so yeah, in this event we really kind of dive into like what does it take, and like there's skills you actually need, right? And then there's also internal shift that you need, just like we were just talking about, so that you actually can freely share and talk about what you do in a way that has people see what's possible, right? And you'd mentioned I did when I first started to really build a energy healing practice per se, which was about 10 years ago, or because it was about 8 years ago, that I started like, I'm going to do this as my main thing. And I was able to go from a few $100s a month, like a few handful of clients, to over 6 figures in a little over a year. And I did it with almost no marketing. Like I tried a few marketing things, but they didn't work particularly well. But I can't say I did zero, because I tried some things. I did put up a website, but the website didn't bring me any clients. Have y'all noticed it doesn't get you a client automatically?
Right, yeah. I know everybody wants a site that nobody's ever going to find.
Exactly. I tried a little bit of advertising, didn't get much from it. But so if I wasn't marketing, because I didn't know how to market back then, how did I do that? And it's because I know how to talk to people. And I shared about what I did, and I shared from a place of confidence of like, that what I do can really help people. And so you don't have to like become Joe Entrepreneur. You don't have to like twist your, kind of spiritual woo-woo self into these, all these patterns and things that people are telling you have to do, and you have to find everybody online. You got to plaster yourself all over social media. And I'm not putting any of that down. Like all of that can work, but none of it really matters if you can't just share about what you do.
Yes.
It comes,
eventually you're going to need to do that.
Eventually you have to actually talk to people. And so it's really about helping you get to the other side of that, where that becomes easy. And fun and enjoyable, and people are happy to pay you. Yeah.
And I always think it's such a good idea to do that training in a group live. Like,
well,
you could read all the things, but like there's a magic.
Something what happens, yes, in a group, and it's live online, so you don't have to travel, but it is live, and it's all your kind of people, right? It's all like healers and transformation people, so you're not like the odd one out. Like everybody gets what you do, because that's another thing that healers in particular tend to feel like, I'm the weird one, no one gets me.
Nobody gets it.
And healers really need community. They really crave community. Most of them feel like they don't have it. And so I've had people come to this event and end up meeting like the person who becomes their best friend for the rest of their life, because that's the kind of people that are there. So
love it.
Yeah.
So we'll let everybody know how to get that in the show notes. I feel like this conversation is filled with these little nuggets. And, for me, this podcast is about the message hitting the ears of the person who's kind of on the edge of their magic. They're like, I think I want to move toward this, or I want to trust myself more, but I'm not sure. And maybe they can't articulate what they're feeling. What message would you have for that person who, like, maybe the people around them don't aren't having the spiritual conversations, and yet they're feeling this fire inside for something different.
Yeah, it's, I think the first thing I would say is really that, you know, you matter, and what matters to you matters. No matter what anybody else says. It might not matter to that person. That's okay. You know, I'm not here to try to convince what matters the whole world that I matter, but I matter, right? And what matters to me matters, and the same for everybody. And you're here for a reason. Lots of reasons, probably. But there's more. You know, there's more. I mean, it's a cliche, but like you're meant for more, right? And you know it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be listening to what we're talking about right now. And there's people who are waiting for you. Yeah, they're literally waiting for you. And it's time to stop being the best kept secret and step into that and explore it. And you're not going to know what it looks like. You create it as you go. So do connect with and surround yourself with people who are on that path. And it's a lot easier than trying to figure it all out on your own.
Yeah. What matters to you matters.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much.
You're
Thanks
welcome.
for coming in person. So being my first, we can hug on camera.
Yes,
and
we
it's
can.
like a thing.
Better.
Thank you, Ann. Bye, everyone.